You ever been to one of those quiet little truck stops off a lonesome stretch of highway, where the world feels like it slows down just long enough for a cup of coffee and a nod to the guy at the next table? That's what I thought I was walking into that night at Harper's Rest, a beat-up little spot off Route 66 in the Oklahoma Flatlands, where the sky was burning orange and red, and the air smelled like diesel and fried onions. I figured I'd grab a burger, stretch my legs after a 12-hour haul, and roll out before the stars faded, but man, was I wrong. My name's Jack Calder, just another trucker with a rig that's seen better days, a 98 Kenworth with a rebuilt engine I've poured more heart into than most folks put into their marriages. I've been driving these roads for 20 years, ever since I left the Marine scene, my share of bar fights, shady deals, and folks looking for trouble, but nothing like what went down that night. Harper's Rest was a sanctuary for guys like me, a place where you could swap stories with folks like Old Man Tucker, a grizzled Vietnam vet with a laugh like gravel, or his niece Sarah, who kept his logbook straight and his blood pressure in check. It was a community, you know, a little slice of home for people who live on the move. But that night, trouble rolled in like a thunderstorm, and it wasn't leaving without a fight. It started with the roar of engines, loud, mean, like a pack of wolves howling in the distance. I was leaning against my rig, sipping coffee that tasted like it had been brewed in a sock, when a dozen motorcycles tore into the lot, kicking up gravel and dust like they owned the place. The Iron Talons, they called themselves, a biker gang with a reputation for shaking down places like Harper's Rest for protection money or worse. Their leader, a guy built like a linebacker with a shaved head and a smirk that screamed bad news, went by the name Bull. Behind him were his crew, Lena, all sharp eyes and sharper knives, twirling a blade like it was a damn fidget spinner. Rhino, a mountain of a man who looked like he could bench press my truck. And Cole, the quiet one, chain-smoking and watching everything like a hawk. They didn't just walk in, he swaggered, boots stomping, leather creaking, radiating the kind of confidence that makes your gut twist. The diner went quiet, the kind of quiet where you can hear your own heartbeat. Truckers froze mid-bite, eyes darting to the floor, hoping to stay invisible. Bull didn't waste time. He strode to the center of the lot, his voice booming like a megaphone. "Nice little setup you got here," he said, grinning like a wolf. "But it's time for new management. You got 1 week to clear out, or we start breaking things, starting with your rigs." He tossed a crumpled piece of paper on a table, some half-assed contract they expected folks to sign, giving up the lot to their crew for whatever shady business they were running, drugs, stolen goods, who knows. Rhino punctuated the point by smashing a crowbar into a picnic table, splintering it like kindling. Lena laughed, a sound that cut through the air like glass, and said, "Hope y'all like change, 'cause it's coming whether you want it or not." I felt my jaw tighten, but I stayed put, watching, sizing them up. I've dealt with guys like this before, bullies who think volume and muscle make them kings. Back in the Marines, I learned you don't win fights by being the loudest, you win by being the smartest. Still, I wasn't looking for trouble, not yet. But then Bull made a mistake. He zeroed in on Tucker, who was sitting with Sarah, his hands shaking just enough to show his age. "What's it gonna be, old man?" Bull sneered, leaning over their table. "Sign the paper, or I start with you." Tucker stood, slow and deliberate, his voice rough but steady. "I fought in jungles tougher than you, kid. Take your circus and leave." The room held its breath. Sarah grabbed his arm, her eyes wide, whispering, "Don't, Uncle Tuck." But Bull just laughed, a deep, ugly sound, and shoved Tucker hard enough to knock him into his chair. That's when something in me snapped, not loud, not showy, just a quiet click, like a safety switching off. I stepped forward, my boots crunching on the gravel, and said, "You're picking the wrong fight, friend." Bull turned, sizing me up like I was just another nobody. "And who the hell are you?" he asked, his smirk daring me to make a move. I kept my voice low, calm, the way you talk to a dog you don't trust. "Just a guy who's tired of punks like you thinking they own the world." The air got heavy, like the whole lot was holding its breath. Lena stopped twirling her knife, her eyes narrowing. Rhino cracked his knuckles, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. Cole flicked his cigarette away, his cool gaze locking onto me. Bull took a step closer, his shadow falling over me. "Big words for a guy who's outnumbered," he said. "You want to play hero? Heroes don't last long out here." I didn't flinch. "I've seen worse odds," I said, and I meant it. I wasn't just a trucker I'd built bridges under fire in Fallujah, defused bombs with seconds to spare, stared down men who made Bull look like a schoolyard bully. But I wasn't here to brag. I just wanted them gone. Bull laughed again, but it was forced, like he was trying to convince himself I wasn't a problem. All right, tough guy, he said, nodding to Rhino. Show him what happens to heroes. Rhino lumbered toward my rig, crowbar swinging like a baseball bat. The first swing dented the side panel, a sound that hit me harder than any punch. That truck wasn't just metal, it was my life, my freedom, every mile I'd fought to keep moving. I felt my hands curl into fists, but I held back, waiting, watching. Lena joined in, dragging her knife across the paint, leaving deep, ugly scratches. Still feeling brave, old man, she called, her voice dripping with mockery. Inside the diner, Sarah's hands were shaking, her voice a harsh whisper. Jack, that's your rig theory gonna ruin it. Tucker put a hand on her shoulder, his eyes locked on me. He's got this, kid. Trust him. I caught their glance through the window, and it steadied me, reminded me this wasn't just about my truck, it was about this place. These people, this little corner of the world we'd carved out. Bull was watching me, waiting for me to break, to beg. Instead, I stepped closer, my voice steady as a drum. You think tearing up my rig makes you tough? All it makes you is a coward. His smirk faltered, just for a second, and I knew I'd hit a nerve. Bull didn't like being called out, not in front of his crew, not in front of a bunch of truckers he thought he could roll over. You're gonna regret that, he growled, and snapped his fingers. Lena, Cole, chain him up. Lena grinned, pulling a rusted chain from her bike, the kind you'd use to lock a gate or break a man. Cole tossed his cigarette and grabbed another, his movements slow, deliberate. Let's make this quick, he said, his voice like ice. The truckers started backing away, fear creeping into their eyes, but I held my ground. You're making a mistake, I said, my voice low, almost a warning. Bull just laughed. Only mistake here is you thinking you can stop us. That's when it got real. Rhino charged, his crowbar swinging for my ribs. I sidestepped, grabbing his wrist and twisting hard, sending the crowbar clattering to the ground. He roared, lunging again, but I was ready. Years of training kicked in, muscle memory from nights I'd rather forget. I drove my elbow into his side, hard enough to make him stagger, and then swept his legs, sending him crashing down. Lena came next, her chain whipping through the air like a snake. I caught it mid-swing, yanking her off balance, her knife clattering as she stumbled. Son of a, she hissed, but I didn't give her time to finish. I dropped the chain and stepped back, my eyes on Bull. The lot was dead silent now, the truckers watching, wide-eyed, like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Bull's face twisted, his pride taking a hit he couldn't ignore. You're dead, he snarled, and came at me himself, his fists like sledgehammers. I ducked his first swing, felt the air whoosh past my ear, and countered with a jab to his ribs. He grunted, but didn't stop, his next punch grazing my shoulder, hard enough to make my arm throb. We traded blows, each one heavier than the last, until he overreacted a wild haymaker that left him open. I stepped in, drove my knee into his gut, and followed with an elbow to his jaw. He hit the ground hard, dust kicking up around him, and I planted my boot on his chest. It's over, I said, my voice cold, final. Take your crew and get out. For a moment, nobody moved. Lena's knife was still in her hand, but she didn't dare step forward. Rhino was groaning on the ground, Cole just watching, his cigarette burning low. Bull glared up at me, his eyes blazing, but he knew he was beat. Fine, he spat, struggling to his feet as his crew helped him up. They mounted their bikes, engines roaring as they tore out of the lot, their tail lights fading into the dark like dying stars. The truckers erupted, clapping, shouting, their fear replaced by something else, pride, maybe, or just relief. Tucker came up, his hand heavy on my shoulder. You didn't just save this place, Jack, he said, his voice thick. You reminded us we're worth fighting for. Sarah hugged me, her eyes wet, and handed me a small pack of jerky and a couple of energy bars, wrapped in brown paper. For the road, she said, smiling through the dirt on her face. But I wasn't done yet. I knew Bull and his crew wouldn't let this go on forever. So we got to work. We dragged tires and pallets to block the entrances, rigged up old floodlights to kill the shadows, set up a watch rotation to keep eyes on the road. Tucker hauled cinder blocks like he was 20 again. Sarah marked the perimeter with reflective cones, and Jenny Tate, a wiry driver with a knack for mechanics, made sure every rig was ready to roll if things went south. It wasn't just about holding the line, it was about showing we weren't prey. Not anymore. By dawn, the lot looked different, stronger, like it had a spine now. But as the sun crept up, I heard it again, that low rumble, growing louder, meaner. The Iron Talons were back, and this time, they weren't playing. Bull led the charge, his bike tearing up the gravel, his crew fanned out behind him like a war party. I raised a hand, signaling the truckers to their spots. "Hold the line," I said, echoing Tucker's words from earlier. They hit us hard, smashing through the barricades, chains and pipes swinging. Jenny lit a flare, the red glow stopping them just long enough for us to push back. Tucker and Sarah toppled a stack of crates, tripping up one of the bikers, while I went for Rhino again, ducking his pipe and dropping him with a knee to the gut. But it was Bull I was watching, his eyes locked on me through the chaos, like this was personal now. He charged, and we collided fists, elbows, raw fury. He was strong, but I was faster, smarter. When he swung too wide, I saw my chance, stepped in, and brought him down with a strike to the temple. He hit the ground, and this time, he didn't get up. "Leave," I said, standing over him, my voice steady but burning. "And don't come back." His crew hesitated, their confidence crumbling. Cole nodded once, sharp, and they dragged Bull to his bike, the roar of their engines fading as they retreated for good. The lot was a mess, torn up gravel, scorched tires, my rig looking like it had been through a war zone. But the truckers were different now, standing taller, their eyes bright with something new. Tucker handed me a faded marine patch, his fingers trembling just a bit. "For what matters," he said. I tucked it into my pocket, climbed into my rig, and started the engine. Sarah called after me, "You don't have to go, Jack." But I smiled just a little. "You've got this now," I said. "Keep it strong." As I pulled onto the highway, the sun climbing higher, I glanced at the photo on my dash, a picture of my daughter, smiling, from a life that feels like a lifetime ago. I'd fought for her once, and I'd keep fighting for her, for places like Harper's Rest, for people who just need someone to remind them they're tougher than they think. The road stretched out ahead, endless, calling me to the next stop, the next fight, the next chance to make a difference. So what do you think? Was I right to stand up, to risk it all for a place that wasn't even mine? Or should I have walked away, let Bull and his crew have their way? Maybe you've had a moment like that, where you had to decide fight or fold. Drop it in the comments. Tell me your story, what you'd have done. Hit that like button if this hit home. Subscribe if you want more stories that make you feel something, and ring that bell so you don't miss the next one. This is Heart Tales, and we're just getting started. Stay strong, stay real, and I'll see you on the road.